Welcome to Lecture 2 for Module 5 of EDD 918. And in this lecture, we're going to dig into the power bases or the bases of power. And if you'll notice, if you look at that slide there, where it says power bases, I have two last names, French and Raven. And French and Raven were the researchers who really broke the ground on organizational power and influence, but actually not just organizations, social power, socialized power, social power, power among individuals and things like that. And they did this work in the 1950s. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, come on, the 1950s, isn't there anything more recent? And I think what is so interesting and great about this area is no one has been able to refute and or totally change the what French and Raven found in the 50s. They are still being taught in management schools, leadership programs, courses on power and influence. You're still going to find primarily French and Raven. Now, some people, obviously people have come along and done research based off of their research. But even to the point where French and Raven identified 5 bases of power. And over the years, some other researchers have come along and said, well, I think there might be 6 or 7. None of those ever stuck. We still, here and there you'll find some others mentioned, but really the accepted ones are the 5 that French and Raven came up with in the 1950s. And how often do we see that in research, right? So I think that's pretty great. And to me, it means that there's something really here. So again, don't hear me saying research hasn't been done. A lot of research has been built around French and Raven and their 5 bases of power. But it's not like anybody has changed it. They're like, yep, that's what it is. So then we look at how it works and the dynamics, things like that. So again, as a quick reminder, power is that reservoir of force, of resources that A has that A can leverage to get B to do things, right? Again, not necessarily a bad thing. Can be used for ill will, but in and of itself, not a bad thing. And this is how we get stuff done in organizations. So now, first slide, you'll see the 5 bases, and we're going to walk through each one relatively quickly because they're pretty easy to understand. So I don't feel like I need to spend a lot of time on them. But here you see them: coercive, reward, legitimate, expert, and reference. So those are the 5 bases of power that French and Raven tried to come up with. Now, some have, again, I've said some have tried to add like knowledge power. Well, really what you're going to see, I think, is that falls under that expert power. And then people will talk about political power and things like that. Okay, well, basically that's just using these bases of power in a political context. So again, while people have tried to add some, basically what other researchers come back then and said is, yeah, that's already covered in what they've got. We don't need to add other terms. You're just muddying the waters. They've got it covered. So that's why we still use French and Raven. So coercive. This is the first one. This is what it sounds like. This is where A has the power to punish B. Except let me amend that statement with something I haven't said yet. Power, socialized power, is the perception. It is all based on perceptions. Now, those perceptions may be true, but not necessarily. So coercive power is the perception that A has the power, the resources to punish B in some way. That could be withholding a good thing. That could be administering punishment. Let me give you a quick example. There's near my neighborhood, there's a church, and it sits up on a hill. And apparently they have their own security car because it's there all the time in their parking lot. Now, this security car is the same style of car, make and model that our highway patrol uses. It is painted just like a highway patrol car or a police car. It's white and then got the black. And it says it doesn't have lights, but it looks like a car without lights, painted just like it. And then it says security. So it's when you get close, it's clear that it's not a cop car. But what they do is, and I think they do it on purpose, they park it right at the edge of the street. And on that particular street, a lot of people don't obey the speed limit, right? I think it's 35, but like 50, 55, people are zooming down there. And I've been on that road behind people who are just flying, and I can see that car at the top of the hill. Now, I know what it is because I've driven that a lot, and I run past there on my runs a lot of times. So I know it's a security car. But I see the brake lights, those brake lights fly on. Why? Because they see what they think is a cop car sitting there, and they know they're speeding. There's nobody in it. Even if there was a guy in it, does he have the power to write them a ticket? No. But there's the perception, right? They think it's a cop car, causes that braking, right? So again, it's built on perception. It's built on you have the power to do this. So that's coercive. Reward, and some people have argued over the years, but again, it's stuck as two. Some have said, well, really, these are the same thing. They're just two sides of the same coin. Fair enough, but like I said, they've stuck as two separate bases of power. Is reward. So coercive is the perception that A has the power to punish, withhold good things, whatever, from B. And then the flip side is they have the power to reward, so they can administer good things to them. So again, built on perception. So if I believe you have the ability to give me something good, then I will be subject to your influence, and I'll be agreeable to do what you want me to do. So that's reward. So you got coercive, reward, again, very, very similar. Legitimate power, and the picture I put on here is kind of, people drawing lines. Legitimate power is very much based on position. So this is where the example I can give you quickly would be me. In this class, I have legitimate power over you. If I have no other power, and I mean others fall into place, but I have legitimate power. Why? Well, because I'm the instructor in the course. So when I post an assignment and say I need you to do this, or here's the due date, you comply with my influence attempt, is how to use our terminology here. You have given me legitimate power over you. Why? Because I'm the instructor. Now that I know there's coercive reward power tied in with that as well, and I'm hoping a couple of the others, we'll get to those in a second. But just simply by the fact that I'm the instructor of the course, it's a legitimate request. Now, if I emailed one of you and said, hey, I ran out of milk, could you run to the store and bring it by my house, especially considering I probably live a good distance from most of you, you'd be like, no? Well, I mean, even if you're a very nice person, why? Well, I'm your instructor, right? But there's no connection. You see the difference. So I can legitimately ask you to complete an assignment. I cannot legitimately ask you to go pick up some milk for my family at the store. So that's legitimate power. And then we have expert power. Expert power is, and I got the books and then the idea about knowledgeable there. It is what it sounds like. You perceive the other person as being an expert in this area, in this field, and so you listen to them. Most of you in this class, if not all of you, are in the medical field, right? And there's, of course, we see this happening all the time. Now, what could be interesting, this would be completely unethical, I'm not suggesting this would be, though, okay, can I rightfully call myself Dr. Mears? Yes, but as I was told one time, but not the kind that helps people. But anyway, I can call myself Dr. Mears. I can put on the white coat, grab a stethoscope, and walk around a hospital, and even get a little name tag that says Dr. Mears. Could I be perceived as being an expert? Potentially. Now, obviously, you would see there's great harm in that. I should not be giving medical advice to people. That's not my area of expertise. But you see how, again, the perception, and somebody might say, oh, okay, well, we need to do what this guy says. He's a doctor. He's got a coat. He's got a stethoscope. He must be an expert, right? And so expertise is based on the knowledge that I have. And so because I am perceived as being an expert in an area, then you comply. You go along. And again, this isn't just in the medical area or professors. car mechanics, right? Any kind of um, my daughter and son-in-law are having some experts in tree removal coming to their house. They're getting bids, right? They've got a bunch of branches and stuff, and maybe even some trees that are going to need to come down. They ask my opinion, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I've chainsawed some things up before, but you don't want me working on those trees. I'm not an expert. So, expertise. And then the last one is referent power. Referent power is built on respect. And I put the statement, respect is for those who deserve it, not for those who demand it. So referent power is going to be built more on a personal relationship. And some have said, well, isn't that the same as expert power? Not necessarily. A lot of times expert power can go along with referent power. If I'm very close to, let's say, a professor who I know is an expert in the field that I'm studying, and we develop a kind of a mentor-mentee relationship, and I grow to really respect this person and highly value them and everything else, well, then if they ask me to do something or give me some suggestions, is that expert power or referent power? That's where it gets muddy. We're not sure, right? Because so it can be. But referent power doesn't have to be built on expert power. My wife can ask me to do things because I love her, which is kind of connected to that idea of respect, right? So there's influence there. And so again, that's hopefully you also see even in some of these examples, sometimes it's hard to separate. And so that brings me, the last thing that I want to cover in this lecture is there's two subsets of social power: positional power and personal power. Positional power would be the first three: coercive, reward, and legitimate. Those are going to be connected primarily to position. So back to our example in organizations, if you're the boss, the manager, you have coercive power, reward power, and legitimate power. Legitimate power, I'm the boss, so I can ask you to do things. And if you don't do them, I have coercive power. I can, we can have a performance review. It'll hurt your performance review. Potentially you lose your job. Reward power, it'll help your performance review. It can give you better assignments, maybe a pay raise, right? That's positional power. And so if I'm your boss and I have those things, but then you leave the company, I can't call you up and say, hey, this is Ryan, I'm your boss. You're like, no, you're not anymore. And so that power is only based on a position. Referent and expert power are based on the person. That's personal power. That goes with me wherever I go. I take my expert power with me, and if we have a relationship, that referent power goes with me. Quick example, because I'm running out of time, but I just want to wrap this up. I think it's a good example of this. So when I taught at Bob Jones University down in South Carolina, I got there in 2010. And a man named Lonnie Polson, who had been my professor, mentor of mine in college, he was our division chair. During that first year I'm there, he said, I'm going to stop being division chair. And he asked me, would you be interested? So they put me into that position. So my second year of teaching, I'm now division chair. Lonnie is no longer division chair, but he was still teaching. He was still a faculty member. In my second year there, Lonnie Polson no longer had, among the other faculty, or over me, he no longer had coercive, reward, or legitimate power. He was no longer division chair, just a faculty member. But I can tell you, he still had expert and referent power with all of us. He's a highly respected man. And just a very intelligent man. I was in his office all the time asking his advice on the division chair things, and he's a man I still, whenever I'm down in Greenville now, because I have a son that lives down there, if we're down there, I try and grab lunch with him. I still value his opinion about a lot of things. So that's an example of where the personal power versus positional power. He could no longer boss people around. Lonnie never did, which is one of the reasons we respected him. But he no longer had that power in my second year of teaching. But boy, did we all listen to him. Did we all take his advice? For sure. And so, again, just an example of those two things. So with that kind of concludes the power section. Next lecture, we're going to look at influence.